Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Binford Chronicles. We have a good evening for us tonight. We've got Steve Myers, Secretary Treasurer of Teamsters LOcal 769 here in South Florida. So, Steve has been a Teamster since 1990 and has spent decades on the front lines of organized labor, representing workers. And I was getting some feedback, guys, there, but he's represented workers and balancing the relationship between employees, unions, and employers. So today we're going to talk about what unions do and the new changes in legislation, because those are very important topics if you're not familiar with unions and you don't understand what's going on. And Steve, he is he's so dedicated to the success and relevance of unions in the workplace. He looks forward to maintaining the high quality of representation that this local union provides its members. Now, let me leave you with food for thought when it comes to unions. And I know some of you are not sure about unions, and some of you are a union member, so you understand the importance of unions. But before I do that, I want to give you an idea who is in the public sector, because we will be talking about that today. You've got teachers, higher education faculty, school support staff. Those are like your secretaries, your lunchroom people, your janitors. All of those people are in the public sector, and they can be represented by the unions. City and county municipal workers, sanitation, road repair, bus drivers for city and public driving transportation, medical, nurses, and clerical staff. So do you fall in any of those? If you do, you want to listen to this show. I want you to know that this is for the benefit of the people, to give them more information on unions and what's going on with legislation. So, what would it look like? I want to ask you this. What would it look like if unions were gone altogether? Do you think employers have the best interests of their staff? Some of them do, some of them don't. Some of them respect their staff, some of them don't. So, unions kind of balance that out. That's what negotiations are all about. And we're going to learn a whole lot more about that. So am I. But right now, we're going to take a short break for a short message. I want you to stay tuned, and we'll be right back with Steve Myers.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Pippin, and I'm running for Indian River County Commission District 2. As a wife, mother, and longtime community advocate, I've spent years standing up for taxpayers, families, and government accountability. I'm running to protect our quality of life, support law enforcement, manage growth responsibly, and ensure your tax dollars are spent wisely. To learn more, request a yard sign, volunteer, or get involved, visit votejenniferpippin.com. Together, we can keep Indian River County the best place to live, work, and raise a family. I'm looking forward to earning your vote on August 18th.
Oh, that was one of the old ones. So, welcome aboard, Steve. I'm so happy that you're here today to talk to us about this.
Thanks for having me, Joanne. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So tell our voters, our viewers, a little about you, because you've been doing this for quite a few decades. I mean, you've been doing this for a while.
Yeah, a little about me. I'm a native Floridian, and I've lived in Vero Beach since 1972, so I'm pretty familiar with this area. I started out as working full time when I was 16 years old. I worked for my father for a few years, and then when I was 19 years old, I became a public employee, and I started working for the city of Vero Beach. And I became a water plant operator and became a state certified water plant operator. And while I was at the city of Vero Beach, the Teamsters Union was the union that represented the employees, and I became involved in the union and stepped up and became the shop steward representing my group there at the water plant. And then a few years later, I took the challenge and became the chief steward and was representing all of the employees at the city of Vero. A few years went by, and then in 2002, the Teamsters came to me and asked me if I would come to work for them. So for the past 24 years, that's what I've been doing, Joanne, just working for the Teamsters, advocating for employees, trying to make working families' lives better, increase people's pay, make sure they have health insurance coverage, and that's kind of what I do. That's what I live for.
Yeah, thank you for your service. I mean, it's really important, especially in Florida, because we're an at-will state, aren't we?
Yeah, and those terms are kind of people kind of get mixed up of what at will means and what those terms really mean. And in 49 states, employees are at will employees. There's only one state that employees are not an at will employee. The difference is Florida is a right to work state. And what right to work means is that if you're represented by a union in your workplace, that you're not required by law to be a member of that union as a condition of your employment. So that's kind of the difference.
Hmm. And pretty much they can let you go for any reason at all.
Yeah, and if you don't have what's known as a collective bargaining agreement, which is what unions negotiate. So unions negotiate a collective bargaining agreement, which inserts into that collective bargaining agreement, a just cause provision, which changes your terms and conditions of employment and makes it where you're no longer an at-will employee.
Hmm.
And the only other way you could change your terms and conditions to where you're not an at-will employee with an employer is if you had some type of personal services contract, like you'll see sometimes a school board superintendent will have, or a city manager or a county administrator may have, where they negotiate that through their attorney and have an employment contract with their employer. So essentially, we negotiate an employment contract between all of the employees in the bargaining unit and the employer.
Very good. So it gives you a little bit more of a staple, right? Because if something goes wrong, then you can go to your union rep and say, "Hey, are they following these procedures that they signed to in the contract and agreed to?" And before things just happen.
That's right. And just make sure that the rules are applied consistently and even application of those rules, and that those employees, all the employees are treated the same and the standards are followed. So obviously we can't get people off the hook if they're stealing or fighting or drinking or doing drugs on the job, and that's really not what we're there for. We're there to protect people that are following the rules, and just the employer's just trying to give them the shaft.
So a lot of things are going on with the union now. There were two bills that came out in 2003, Senate Bill 256. What did it do to public sector unions?
So for you know 50 years prior to that, you know unions were allowed to negotiate into their collective bargaining agreements payroll deduction of union dues. So if a member would sign an application voluntarily to join the union, their dues would be deducted from their paycheck and then remitted to the union each month from the employer.
Hmm.
So Senate Bill 256 in 2023, stripped those rights away from all of the public employees. So no longer were unions allowed, or were employees allowed to freely join the union and have those payroll deductions from their paycheck. The unions have to go out and sign up all of the members individually. They either have to pay by credit card or write us a check, or sign up through their ACH through their checking account.
So when it went through the paycheck, was it more stable for the union to have members pay, or do you see a difference in that rule change?
Yeah, it was much easier. The obviously the employees, if you don't see it before you've spent it, kind of thing, that
Hmm.
the money's there, and the employees always like that. And if they didn't like it, under Florida law, because we are a right to work state, at any time those employees could have just ceased to have their union dues deducted. But that, and there was a lot more to the Senate Bill 256. I mean, there were they inserted in there that we had to have a specific authorization form. The state dictated what the authorization form is going to look like. All of the officers, like myself, their salaries have to be on the front of the membership application that employees are filling out. You have to maintain a certain 60% membership level, and if you don't maintain that 60% membership level, then you have to have an annual recertification of the bargaining unit, and that has to happen for all public sector units unless you're one of the exempt groups. So if you're a fire bargaining unit or police, EMS, or something in that, then you're exempt from that law, and none of those provisions apply.
So like all the public sectors would apply, and that's quite a
Well,
big number.
well, it is all public sector, but keep in mind that police and fire, EMS, you know, are all in the public sector also, but the state exempted those bargaining units from these provisions applying. So, for example, in our local union, we also, we represent fire battalion chiefs in Cocoa and Rockledge, and then
Mhm.
we also have the the police officers and firefighters and paramedics over at Indian River Shores here in Indian River County. Those bargaining units are exempt from this law, so those employees are still allowed to have their dues remitted from their paycheck. It's just
Right.
im-
Because they're important. They don't want to lose those people. They want to protect those people because that's like, our first responders.
yeah, and I'm not sure, what their motivation with it. The entire legislation was probably, where they were just trying to kill the teachers' unions, and all of the other unions have been lumped in with all this legislation. So that's, it's obviously a paperwork nightmare, trying to chase down every single member to make sure that their accounts are updated on a monthly basis. So
Well, I would think that would be tougher to get those qualifications for recertification for things like sanitation or like office staff, like the secretaries and janitors, and because they have smaller numbers. Um, and you kind of, how do you reach those people in those facilities?
yeah, you really just have to rely on. We have at each of our locations, we have shop stewards, and we just have to try to rely on the stewards to kind of branch out and touch those people. We try to do email communication, text message communication.
Hmm.
So it's tough, but we've made it work since 2003, since they implemented this, and I'm sure we'll talk later about what they've tried to do now with Senate Bill 1296 when that went into effect this year. But
Yeah. So, like, what problems do public employees need to be aware of if the union loses its certification to be a public sector bargaining agent?
yeah. So on day one, if we lose our certification at any workplace, those employees automatically become at-will employees on day one. So there's no more grievance procedure, no more contract, whatever they may have been entitled to contractually that is above and beyond what are outlined in the whether it be the city personnel policies or county administration manual if it's a county. Those things automatically just go away, and you fall back to what the city or county rules are.
Yeah. So, unions, they have additional registration and reporting requirements. Is that PERC? Is that what that is?
Yes, and PERC stands for the Public Employees Relation Commission, and they're obviously based out of Tallahassee, and they're the ones that oversee all public sector bargaining in Florida. Really under Chapter 447 are the guidelines that they fall under, that they you know handle all of the unions under.
Wow. So, that sounds like you guys have a lot of paperwork.
Yeah, I get to be the one that does most of it. So yeah, it's a paperwork nightmare, to be honest with you, Joanne.
So let's move into 2026, the newer law, Florida Senate's 2026 legislature. It includes provisions restricting when a public employer can provide paid time, leave, or benefits for union activities for non-public safety bargaining units. There are situations where the union reimburses the employer. Can you explain that?
Yeah, and that's really more along the lines where if you don't have language in your collective bargaining agreement that, for example, that would allow shop stewards to be present at a grievance meeting, then if you didn't have that language in your contract, then you wouldn't be allowed to do it unless you reimburse the employer for it. So essentially, you have to have the language negotiated. If you have it negotiated in your contract, then you don't have to reimburse them. But the what 1296 was really trying to do was after Senate Bill 256 was put into effect in 2023, which, despite whatever these legislators were say the intent was, the intent was to try to kill unions. None of the unions lost any elections. Matter of fact, Teamsters Local 769 won all of our elections by 95% or greater. But just like you probably seen in the local primary elections that we just had last week. I mean, the participation sometimes in getting people to vote sometimes is low. I think whatever we had like 23, 24% of the people voting statewide.
Yeah. We
And the
always have that number. It's like people don't come out to vote in the primaries.
right. And sometimes local unions run into those type of things with union elections also. So we were running about, even though we were winning the elections by 95%, only about 40 to 45% of the employees were participating in the election. So then Senate Bill 1296 is trying to really be the death of the unions by trying to, they inserted language in there that if 50% of the employees in the bargaining unit do not vote, then the union automatically is decertified. So if we have, and I'll use our Fort Lauderdale bargaining unit as an example. It's our largest bargaining unit, and then we have right at 1,000 employees in that bargaining unit. If only 499 of those employees show up to vote, and we win the election, would have won the election 499 to zero, we automatically lose our certification.
So, for the viewers to understand, when you say the bargaining unit, does that mean only union members or union members and non union members?
It means both union members and non-members that are in the collective bar that are in the bargaining unit. So whether they're paying dues or not, they're considered to be bargaining unit employees. So if there's, using the Fort Lauderdale example, 1,000 employees in that bargaining unit, all of them, whether they're dues paying members or not, you have to have more than 500 of those employees vote. If not, you automatically lose. They won't even count the ballots.
See, that would be tough with like smaller units, smaller groups, because the likelihood that you can get everybody on board is kind of small. Because a lot of people, I've met a lot of people, throughout the years, and they say, well, I'm fine. And I try to explain to them, you're fine because you're actually getting the benefits of the union. You're not paying, but you're actually getting the benefits because they're negotiating these contracts. Once those contracts go away, then what happens?
That's true, and they are fine until they're not, right? Because you never know when you're going to hit a bump in the road. You may have a good relationship with your manager or supervisor today, and then that manager or supervisor retires, and then you hit a bump in the road, and now you have problems with the new one. So I mean that happens all the time. So, which those employees would then be subject to being at will employees, and if your manager says jump high, you're going to have to say how high.
Well, you also affect the pay structure, like because you negotiate the pay raises and stuff. So whatever a union member gets, the non-union member gets pretty much. So if you go away and the company's not going to give any of those little incentive rate increases, that's going to go away too, isn't it?
Yeah, most likely it will. And then, look, I mean, it's a fact. It's not my opinion. It's statistics show it that, union employees on average make more than non-union employees, and there's a reason. When you're, if you're not at the bargaining table bargaining, you're not going to be able to do as well as if you are. There's those are what the facts show.
Yeah, I know a lot of people have a little stipulation about unions because they're like, well, what are they going to do for me? It's kind of like car insurance, right? You don't use it, you don't need it until you need it.
That's
And
right.
then when you don't have it, then you realize, wow, I wish I had that.
Yeah, that's a good analogy, Joanne. I mean, how would you feel if you just went without car insurance for a few days in this town driving around? You'd feel so uneasy just driving around. Well, that's how a lot of our bargaining employees would feel without a union. They would just be so uneasy that they'd probably have to find a different job, or start looking for a different job.
Yeah, I think unions kind of balance it out because I think if unions, my opinion, it's not everybody's opinion, but I feel if unions weren't there at all, it would open the door to, taking advantage of your employees, and not really having to care about your employees, because there are some people out there that are really good to their employees, and then you have those people that just look at you like you're labor, and that's it, and
That's,
and they'll treat you that way.
that's exactly right. So it's going to be a tough road ahead with this, legislation on Senate Bill 1296 that went into effect on July 1st. But I'm pretty confident that our local union is going to be able to survive. We've got a plan of how we're going to make sure that we get more than 50% of the employees in the bargaining unit to vote. And based on our numbers from our previous elections, you know, we're we're going to win the elections. Just once we get the people to the polls, we're going to be good. And the other twist to it that is in this 1296, Joanne, is they also added to this legislation that if the public employer insists on having a mail ballot election, which most of us hate, okay, then the state is going to require everybody in that bargaining unit to participate only by mail ballot instead of an in-person voting at the employer's workplace. So, we in the last couple of years we've had some of these elections where they're mail ballot elections, and they're a disaster. The voting
What
percentages are lower.
what does that look like?
Well, I mean, it looks like you're chasing people, so generally you have 30 days from the time they send the ballots out. So about 10 days into it, you'll start getting calls from members saying, I never received a ballot. Okay. And you're chasing, you're having to provide the phone numbers to the Public Employee Relation Commission for those people to call to get a new ballot. We've had stories where people didn't get their second ballot until after the voting was already done. So it totally disenfranchises the voter. So and that's going to be a problem for us. This mail
So
ballot.
you mail the ballots out and then they mail them back?
The union doesn't mail them out. The Public Employees Relation Commission mails the ballots from Tallahassee to what
Ah,
to the address that the employer provided to them, and we have to hope that's right. And then after they send the ballots out, if the employee does not ever receive the ballot through the mail, then they have to call the Public Employee Relation Commission and get a new ballot sent to them, and then get it all back within that 30-day time limit. And if it doesn't make it back in time, it doesn't count. So
that's like elections. How do you even know that the members even know that there's a vote going on?
that, that's exactly right. And this
You
is
know?
this is what we're going to have to deal with this new. And it was so surprising that this legislature in Florida would try to put, those type of provisions in there for mail ballot voting, that the employer has the right to dictate mail ballot voting. I mean, I hate the mail ballot voting, whether it's for local elections or any other election. I like
Yeah,
in-person voting.
because it's not even your office sending the ballots out, so you don't even know if they remember to send the ballots out. They can just say we sent them out.
Or
We don't like unions. Oops, I thought I mailed them.
right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
That's like putting your trust in somebody else's hand to deliver it. And they don't like you.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So yeah, I could see the stress in that, because even on your level, you guys have ballot issues to worry about. You
We do.
know,
We do.
but yeah, that's crazy. That's just taking too much out of the hands of the union. And those are areas that you don't need to really take out of the hands of unions. I know some unions have gotten so big, like the teachers union has gotten so big, they've just done some crazy things, that people have disagreed with. And so people have a yucky flavor in their mouth about unions, but unions are really valid. If we had no unions, it would be like work slave labor. It could, in some places, not everywhere, but there's always that person out there that will take advantage of a situation that they can,
That's
you
exactly
know.
right. That's exactly
So
right.
it just leaves the door open for, abuse and of power, and there's a lot of people out there that will take advantage of that, and there's a lot of people out there that can't afford to lose their jobs over nonsense like that.
That's right. I mean, a lot of these people, whether they're in a pension plan or something else that they're trying to get vested in, and they can't take a chance on losing their union, or trying to be at will employees and losing everything they've worked for their entire career.
Yeah, the union gives you that like like car insurance. It gives you that insurance
That's right.
that a process is going to be followed. In that contract, you just can't just be by the wayside and say, "Well, because I can."
That's right. And that's an important piece of it, Joanne, is making sure that everybody has due process, and people just can't be suspended or terminated, at will.
Yeah, well, with livelihood being such a tough thing these days, where a lot of jobs these days aren't really maxing out what they could in payroll because the, the way society is housing, it's just gotten way out of control. You could be making a decent salary and you still can't afford housing because it's just the balance is so off. So job security is really important.
Yeah, and look, I mean, you live here just like I do, Joanne, so you know what the housing prices in Indian River County are. They're you
They're
know
astronomical. They've changed so much since I moved here in 2004. And from 2004 to now, that the pricing, there's no way I could have did it.
yeah,
And, you
you're right.
know,
I
as
bought
a
my
single
I bought
mom.
I bought my first house in 1990, I think, and I paid $46,000 for it, and my house payment was $246 a month. So, you
Mm.
know, you could live on that with a city or county job, and not have a problem making your mortgage payment. But, those house prices are gone. It's
Yeah, the mortgage payments are like 2,500 now to $3,500, but the jobs aren't really, they're not compare. You've got to have two people in a household bringing an income in. It's no longer that one income or you're living in a closet.
right,
you
right.
know you'll be paying $1,000 for a closet for 800 square feet or 600 square feet. It's insane. So I think unions offer that balance and that security to help manage the office and keep it flowing, keep those relationships going, and I think they play an important role.
That's right. And look, we want to make sure. Look, we're not going to make anybody, especially in the public sector. We're not going to make them rich, but we want to be able to ensure that our members have a livable wage. That's really what we try to do.
Yeah, and nepotism doesn't fall into it either. They can't just get relieved, for any reason. They're a little bit protected because that contract says there's steps that you have to follow and you've agreed on it, and that gives a little more security. I mean, they still can do what they want, but they still have to go through a process to do it.
Right. They can do what they want. Look, they can fire somebody right now under a union contract, but there's consequences if the employee files a grievance, and we go to do arbitration, and the arbitration is binding on the employer, and if the employee is reinstated, then the employer is going to owe, back pay and everything else. So I mean, look, they can do whatever they want, but as long as they have a union contract, they're protected, and there's consequences to the employer making bad decisions.
So, Steve, you've been traveling a lot in your position. Like you are dealing with a lot of cases. Are you allowed to give examples of some cases so that some of our viewers that are not union members may get a little reality check?
Well, what do you mean, like examples of cases?
Yeah, of how the union has helped some people, because you're traveling, you're like battling, you're doing grievances and all over the place. So
Well,
I know
in the
you've got some more information in there.
in the public sector, Jan, we represent, public sectors all the way in our local union. We're based out of Miami. We have an office in Miami, Pompano, West Palm, Vero Beach, where I'm at right now, and then we have another office in Orlando and Tampa for our airline folks. So we kind of are all over South Florida. So you know we have you know a lot of stories. But for example, we had a case. I think it was last year or the year before, with a sanitation driver down in Fort Pierce that was terminated, and we took it to arbitration, and he was reinstated with full back pay and benefits, and he's been back to work there, and that he should have never been fired for what they fired him for. And it's those, and he's having a great career now, and he wouldn't have had it without the union. Recently we just had a case over in Indian River Shores where you had one of our police sergeants that was suspended. We arbitrated his case, and the arbitrator removed his suspension, and the town had to reinstate his pay and remove his suspension from his file, and it was made him completely whole, and cleared his record as it should have been, because he should have never been suspended for what they suspended him for.
Yeah, that's huge. That's so huge. And when you lose your job, I mean, unemployment isn't going to pay your bills, especially at what we have to pay them now. you
Yeah,
know?
unemployment won't even pay your electric bill.
No, I mean it's ridiculous. So yeah, those are great examples, because they're made whole again, and that's just great. And without a union, they wouldn't have been able to do all of that, or they would have had to hire an attorney, which would have cost them a ton of money. And people don't usually attorneys don't usually sue grievances against companies. The attorneys usually sue for on the side of the company.
That's generally right. And look, I mean, without a union contract, I mean, you can sue an employer for wrongful termination, but it's generally under the terms of some type of Title VII discriminatory actions that the employer has taken against the employee, race, creed, color, national origin, those type of things, which, are always harder to prove.
Mhm. Yeah, and if you're a white person, you can't even use that. It's like you're not considered the race,
Yeah,
the
you may be able,
protected race. So if you
yeah,
worked for
unless you're an old guy like me, Joanne.
yeah, so it gets complicated because you really there's not an attorney that's going to defend somebody against a company. I mean, you can try calling, and they'll say, well, we do cases for the company. Usually that's how it is. What you get that answer on the phone.
That's where the money's at for the attorneys, right?
Yeah, yeah, the corporations that have all the money, or the taxpayer dollars.
That's exactly right.
Well, Steve, I want to thank you for coming on. I really wanted to share that information because I know some people are just so relaxed about the unions and not paying the unions, but at the same time, their company has a union. So they're really reaping some of the benefits of the union. And they don't realize that when that union goes away, if the union had it in there for the year, we're going to get a 3% raise at this time. And they're used to getting that. Next year, there might be not a raise at all until just the yearly raise or the step raise that's already in there.
Well, that is true. And look, I have my belief of what I believe right to work means. And I believe right to work, in my opinion, just means that employees have the right to be welfare recipients on the union. And I really don't like welfare recipients. Okay. I don't like people, you know, that don't pay their fair share and let everybody else pay their way. And that's what happens in a right to work state is have the right to sit there and collect all the benefits that union
Mm-hmm.
members have and not pay one penny. So that's it's not a good position to be in, as when you're trying to represent employees and you have to represent the non-union and the union the same.
Yeah, and you still spend, it costs you a lot of money to go from one place to another to file all this paperwork, all this time. So it's costing you money to represent union members. But have you ever represented a non-union member?
In the in Florida has a provision in Chapter 447 that in the public sector we do not have to represent in the grievance procedure for a non-member. But those same rules don't apply in the private sector. So in our local union, the majority of our members are in the private sector. So we have about 10,000 private sector members. So we're probably 1,500 public sector members and about 10,000 private sector members. So in the private sector, you have to represent those employees regardless of whether they're paying dues or not paying dues. But we don't have the problem in the private sector like we have in the public sector. UPS is our largest employer that we have in the private sector in our local union, and our membership levels are probably around 95% membership levels for those those employees. So it's just a different type. And look, you have more bargaining power in the private sector. You can, even in Florida, you have the right to strike an employer if your demands aren't met at the bargaining table. In the
Oh, I
public,
didn't know that. They can strike in Florida?
yeah, you can, yeah. Right to work doesn't have anything to do with striking. So we just last year we had a very successful strike down in Palm Beach with Hertz Rent a Car, and the strike went on for almost a month, but it was a very successful strike, and we were able to prevail in what we were fighting for. So, but yeah, you can strike in the private sector in Florida. You just can't strike in the public sector. And matter of fact, they in this Senate Bill 1296, they actually increased the penalties that a public sector union would have to pay if they did strike. Which, look, we're not going to strike in the public sector. We're not going to. Besides the financial penalties, there's jail time involved, and I don't look good in orange.
Yeah, and they probably do that because they don't want a whole force going on strike or a whole teachers union going on strike, shutting down schools. That
Right.
would be a really powerful strike.
That's right. So
I think they've done that in New York State where they've had like police go on strike and stuff like that.
that's right.
And that creates a lot of danger in the streets when your police force isn't working. Yeah. So I really appreciate you coming on and talking about this because I think it is important. And I don't think all unions are as powerful as some of them out there, like the teachers union. I know a lot of people don't like the teachers union, but unions still play a very important role. And I think you've been doing a good job.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you being a union member. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for serving. That's I could see it takes a lot of work pulling the meetings together and then traveling all the time. You just got your traveling suitcase with you all the time.
I do. I knew what I was signing up when I signed up. So I
Well,
knew what
it's your passion. And
that's
I
right.
can tell. Right.
That's right.
Well, thank you for joining me, and you have a good evening. And I hope everybody got a lot of good information from this.
Thanks again, Joanne.
All right. Have a good evening.
You too.
All right, guys, I hope you really enjoyed that. I wanted to educate you on the unions because those two bills have really made some changes. And go sign up for the union, support the union. It's not that much money out of your paycheck. If you look at the description below on my page, you will see the link to the local Teamsters 769, and you can read about it. They have a podcast that talks about it. So you can click on those links to learn more about the discussions that they're having. It's very informative. And, protect yourself. It's like car insurance, right? You don't use it until you need it. But if you don't have it, then you regret it. So have a good evening. Remember, every Friday at 7 p.m., I'm hosting on the board report. And every Thursday, I'm here at Binford Chronicles. Enjoy your evening, folks.